Joining me live here in the studio is David Robinson. He is the co-founder and CEO of Internet 2.0 and it is a US-Australian cybersecurity company known for its research into the practices of TikTok and the origins of COVID. David, good to see you. Long introduction for you, but one you're certainly worthy of. First of all, if I can start to talk to you about the North Korean hackers. I mean, we know North Korea for a few things. We didn't know they were entirely proficient in hacking. Is this because of the close relationship with Russia?
It's great to be here, Laura. Thank you so much for your time. There is a lot of pipes getting connected between the consumer market and the cryptocurrency industry. The ETF approvals, the massive bull run going on at the moment, consumers are more and more exposed to cryptocurrency. And because of the borders of currency in US dollar to North Korean currency, for example, they target cryptocurrency. So consumers are at a huge risk from North Korean hackers. They've stolen $3 billion to date, according to the UN.
$3 billion.
That's correct.
Mostly from
consumers,
yep.
High net worth individuals, and the platforms themselves.
Wow. Yep. And the evidence is partially that this goes into North Korean coffers and they spend a lot of their money on weapons, essentially.
So, I mean, I own a cyber company. We have responded to significant events in Australia that we can't really talk about, but these North Korean hackers were looking to steal $100 million plus of Australian-owned cryptocurrency.
So you'd have to assume it's state-sanctioned as well, because nothing happens in North Korea without leadership being involved.
Yeah, these guys are operating on behalf of the leader of North Korea.
Interesting that we just heard an hour and a half inquiry looking into social media, Meta in particular, and how it impacts Australian society. This is something that the world is grappling with, not just in Australia. You've looked into TikTok as well and the effects that has. Can you talk to us a little bit about that research? Yeah,
so our research has been used by the FCC, by the Australian government. It was widely covered for the last 3 years about the dangers of TikTok's data harvesting practices. We've given many testimony across the world, including in Europe, US and Australia. From my perspective, the Australian government is up against it. The Australian society is up against it from these social media companies.
Why?
Because they're large, they've got a huge amount of capital. They're governed by US law with a US power base. So our laws are in Australia. So we have very limited influence in Australia against, what they might do globally. So these guys have a huge concentration of power. They also have software on their side. So we're not covering, in my opinion, the bots problem on Twitter, on Facebook, and bots are a significant capability to outweigh any news organisation or democratic processing.
Why are social media companies so reluctant to have identity verification, for example? How would that affect their business model? Have you looked into that? I think they argue that, in a democracy, you have a right to be anonymous. But there is a lot
I think if someone took a real...
about social media, the trolling is a big problem.
Yeah, so trolling is a massive problem from a mental health and, children perspective. I personally don't think children should have social media under the age of 16. The algorithm is in control of what they think and it can perpetuate their desires and interests further than what is normal without it. But from my perspective, if you look at the social media's business model, advertising is their key metric for finance return. So everything relies on their business model. They are companies in the end. Now, if they're US companies, then they're governed by US law, but advertising is the core of their business model. So, obviously, Andrew Forrest is suing them in the US, and I think that's going to have a more impact than any government inquiry in Australia.
David, what is your perspective on whether the social media companies can actually pull this content? Can they do it? Because they argue it's too difficult. The harmful content I'm talking about.
You're talking objective misinformation?
Yeah. Objective misinformation.
They could easily program software to do it.
They argue that it's too hard and there's a freedom of speech aspect.
So I understand their freedom of speech. Okay. They have a point there. What is objective truth? Because freedom of speech and misinformation, disinformation, if we start legislating what is truth, then we're going in complete against our own justice system. So they struggle with this. They're confused by it, to be honest. They don't understand how to react because they live in a very free, democratic, free speech society, which is the US. So we're living in the US in social media respect because it's governed and built in the US. But they have an inherent flaw, which is bots. They allow these botnets.
And they could get rid of them, but they don't.
Yes. Advertising.
Advertising.
My opinion only.
Wow. Okay. We'll leave it there. David, we'll
Thanks,
speak to you
Laura.
again soon.